chess friends, welcome to the Fide World Chess Championship 2024, Round 12. I am going to illustrate the brilliant chess game played between Liren and Gukesh D. Liren showcases his super intelligence and brilliance over Gukesh D, surprising Gukesh and shocking the world. He equalizes the score to 6-6 in the Fide World Chess Championship. This means the scoreboard is tied for both players, creating an extremely difficult situation for both players in the upcoming days. So, stay tuned until the end of the video with me, and let's get started without wasting any time. Ding started the game with c4, we have e6, where d5 and knight to f6 can be possible. We have g3 on the board, where bishop to g2 will come with the idea of dominating the center, along with knight to c3, where d3 and e4 can be possible. We have d5, immediately attacking the center. Liren is not afraid of this. We have bishop g2, if you capture the pawn on c4, congratulations. My bishop's diagonal will be wide open, where queen to a4 can arrive to attack the queen and the pawn simultaneously. It will create significant pressure on the queen side. That's why we have knight to f6, trying to protect the center. We have knight to f3 and d4 on the board, because this pawn is well protected by the queen, and knight to c6 can arrive with the idea of playing e5 on the board. We have castling and knight to c6 to protect the pawn. Here, Ding has the chance to play d3, trying to stabilize his pawn structure, where e3 can be possible and bishop c5 will arrive. After a few moves, you can see that this position will be well secured by Gukesh. After a capture and recapture, the pawn is well protected by the bishop. The bishop will have a good square, where the light squared bishop can develop and Gukesh will have a leading position. That's why, going back to the position, Ding didn't play d3, he immediately struck in the center with e3 on the board, attacking the pawn. Gukesh faced a very difficult situation in the opening. He just played bishop to e7 casually, and we have d3 on the board. This position is similar to the previous one. As you can see, the knight can go there, rook to e1 can arrive, and you can push forward your queenside pawns and put your queen here. Therefore, Gukesh just captured the pawn on the e3 square, and after recapture, Gukesh had the opportunity to consider knight to g4 to put pressure on the bishop or to play short side castling. Both moves are possible, but Gukesh played it differently because he is the formidable guy from India, and India is the source of intelligence. He played e5, the pawn is well protected, the dark squared bishop is freed from its passive position, allowing it to join the action. We have a few casual moves and rook to e1 to get access to this semi-open file, where a3 and b4 can be possible by Liren to gain access to this light square diagonal. You can see that Liren is creating pressure on the pawn on the e5 square indirectly. We have h6 on the board by Gukesh because Gukesh doesn't want Ding to develop his pieces to the 5th rank, where it could create trouble. Therefore, we have a3, where Ding is threatening to consider b4. We have a5, stopping b4, because Gukesh has the opportunity to open up the rook file. We have h3, with Ding planning to protect the g4 square from any invasion, where king to h2 and knight to f4 can be possible. These moves aim to open up the bishop's diagonal. Alright, moving ahead, we have rook to b8. Rook b8 has a good idea of opening up the b file, and that's what Gukesh wants in his game. If Gukesh becomes the world champion, it would be a mind-blowing situation among all chess players and an incredible celebration for India. Knight b5 was considered to stop the b5 move, and the e5 pawn is targeted by two pieces. Ding can play rook to d1 to gain access to these files. If Ding ever gets control of the f4 square for his bishop, this would be a very challenging situation for Gukesh. Gukesh has to play very carefully because he is playing with the black pieces. If he gets the chance to make the game a draw, he should take it. We have bishop to f5 to put pressure on the pawn on d3, where the knight can maneuver to c5 to add more pressure on the d3 pawn. That is Gukesh's plan. A few moves later, knight to d7 followed to create some pressure on the bishop on e3, the queen slides to d2. And here many players might consider knight to c5. Why? Because Stockfish recommends that move since it creates some pressure. But hold on, you are playing in the World Chess Championship, so don't be greedy or play moves too quickly. You should think at least 10 to 20 moves ahead in each variation. Here, Gukesh could create a historical repetition with knight to d3. History speaks for itself. Then comes d5, sacrificing the rook on the board because, after capture and recapture, knight to d4 will happen, and in a few moves, the king will be left with 3 minor pieces against a rook and a bishop, but this position is almost equal for both sides because the knight has good activity and domination over the board, where bishop to f4 can be possible and the king will have open files. However, Gukesh was not interested in the knight to c5 move. That's why he didn't play it. Instead, he moved his bishop back to g6, we have d4, attacking the center because Ding wants to open up the center as Gukesh's pieces are very passive. Can Gukesh capture the pawn on the d4 square? Let me show you the variation. Then bishop to f4 will arrive with the idea of attacking the pawn on c7. Gukesh has to play very carefully. You must protect the pawn. Losing a pawn in the middle game would result in positional disadvantages. Therefore, after knight takes d4, attacking the knight, you must respond. After the exchanges on the d4 square, you can see that the queen and rook simultaneously pressure the knight on d7. Many players here might consider knight to c5 to protect the pawn on b7 from an invasion. However, knight takes c7 would then arrive, targeting the rook. Rook takes c7 might follow, but hold on. Ding has something special for you. He will make a move that will make you cry. Queen takes d8. After the exchanges, Ding will win the rook, forcing Gukesh to pack his bags and leave without winning the World Chess Championship. But Gukesh is the future of India. He is the Enlightenment, and he has to become the world champion. So, in the alternative variation, we discovered that playing knight to c5 was a very bad choice. Another move that is possible is knight to f6, which can be chosen by many chess players, but this is also a bad move because, after the queen moves, the queen will be under attack. After bishop d6, capture, recapture, and bishop takes bishop will happen. You can see how the knight can make a fork on the queen and the rook simultaneously on the board. The position will again be over. So, let me share an inspirational quote in sudden with you. One day, you'll look back at this time in your life and be so proud of yourself for never giving up. So, going back to the position, in the main line, we discovered that e takes d4 was a very bad choice. That was not considered by Gukesh because he realized every variation behind the move. That's why he played e4 to attack the knight, and the knight has no good squares to go. It has to retreat to the g1 square, forcing the king to attack the pawn on e4 indirectly. Alright, we have knight to b6 on the board to attack the pawn. These knights are creating pressure, and even bishop f6 came. You can see how Gukesh's pieces are working together, attacking the center with every piece. The rook has an open file, and Gukesh is trying to do his best, but we have a4, where knight a5 can be possible to ruin the position of Ding Liren. That's why Ding Liren first considered knight to e2, developing one piece. Here, Gukesh had the opportunity to consider knight to a5. Where knight b3 is possible, then Ding has to consider c5. After knight to c4 happens in the game, you can see that these knights will just dominate the board. Therefore, you might think of capturing the pawn on the a4 square because it is free to capture one pawn. After c6 happens on the board, white has to consider knight to d6. He has no other choice. By the way, he cannot capture the knight right away. The best move for black would be to consider b5, after this, and some moves later. Knight to c4 will arrive. This position is again equalized, where the knight is creating some dominance on the board, but in our actual game, Gukesh didn't find the knight to a5 move. He played another good move, which was bishop to g5. Bishop g5 is a problematic move because now Ding gets the opportunity to swing his knight to the f4 square, attacking the bishop. Now you have to capture my knight. After the exchanges, you can see that the bishop gets a very good diagonal over the board. It's time for Ding Liren to lead in the game because he also has the center pawns. The pawn on e4 is also under attack. In a few moves, when queen to c3 arrives, you can see how Ding's pieces are creating much pressure on Gukesh's position. Here, the best move for Gukesh would be to consider f6 on the board. f6 is a very strong move that creates space for the knight on e5. After d5 attacks the knight, the knight will get the e5 square, and the pawn on e4 becomes very weak. Therefore, Ding might think of capturing the pawn on the e4 square because he loves to hit pawns. after the exchanges occur, Gukesh needs to consider c6 on the board, creating pressure on the pawn and the knight simultaneously. You can see that by creating pressure on the pawn, the c-file might open for the rook, where Ding will face a problematic situation. Therefore, Ding has to consider knight to a7. That is the only move to save the game. After rook to a8, the knight will be trapped. After the exchanges occur on the e5 square, Ding will lose the knight on a7. Now, Ding has to again consider d takes c6, a forcing move to compel Gukesh to capture the rook. After the exchanges, you can see that pawn promotion is coming on the board. After capture, queen check will arrive. After the king moves, queen to e4 check will arrive. You can see that Ding has to make a forcing draw on the board because he is left with only a single queen. Gukesh will happily enjoy the draw because he is 1 point ahead of Ding Liren. This would be a very good result for Gukesh. But in our actual game, Gukesh didn't play f6, instead, he played a very mistaken and blunderous move, knight back to b8. Why did you move back your knight? This is a nonsensical move. I am very upset with you, Gukesh. Why did you make this move? The knight needs almost 1, 2, 3 moves to activate in the game. Meanwhile, Ding Liren gets the opportunity to push forward his d5 pawn to create some dominance. After queen d7, he gets the opportunity to play d6. Ding Liren's d6 pawn becomes a very essential and strategic maneuver for his pieces. The d6 pawn is well protected, and you cannot capture it. The dumb knight on the b8 square is just passive. Gukesh made his position very bad. It's a very bad situation for Gukesh. Here, many players might think of considering c6 to kick out the knight, but that is not a good move because there is knight to c7, which will attack the rook. After the rook moves, queen to b4 will arrive, and you can see that the knight on the b6 square has no good squares to go. The knight will lose its life. So, going back to the position, Gukesh didn't consider c6. After all, he is a super chess grandmaster. Therefore, he played c5, stopping the queen from coming to the b4 square. After knight to c7 happened in the game, attacking the rook moved. We have bishop takes e4, attacking the bishop. Gukesh's position is very bad. He doesn't want to let Ding capture on e4 and gain access to his e7 square, where the knight can maneuver to create pressure. Therefore, Gukesh just developed his knight back to the c6 square. Why, Gukesh, did you move back your knight? You ended up with a very bad position. In a few moves, you can see that knight to e7 is coming. The pawn is well protected, and the rook can also join the attack. The pawn on d6 is just marvelous. It is like Alexander, born to conquer the world but not India. We have c takes d5, not rook takes knight on the board. After c takes d5, the knight is under attack. Ding Liren again forces Gukesh to retreat his knight to the b8 square. Knight to d4 is not possible. You will lose your pawn. Therefore, in this position, Gukesh has to play knight to b8. It's like the knight is killed again because it has no future on the a6 square. Meanwhile, Ding gets enough opportunity to push forward his pawns. His bishop has crossed swords. The rook and queen are also very active. We have queen takes c5, and Ding is creating much pressure on Gukesh's position. In a few moves, you can see how Gukesh struggles to survive on the board. Finally, we have d7 on the board, attacking the rook. Where should the rook move? If the rook goes to the d8 square, it will be a very vulnerable move because there is bishop to d6, attacking the rook. After rook to e8 and bishop moves, rook to e5 will arrive. Queen takes d7 looks like the bishop is well protected, but you will lose your rook. I will have a passed pawn with an extra rook for your exchange sacrifice. The position will be completely in Ding Liren's hands. Therefore, in this position, Gukesh thought for many minutes and played rook to c4. The queen moved back. Then rook to e8, followed by bishop to d6, created some pressure. We have rook to c2, followed by bishop to d6, attacking the rook. This is a hopeless situation for Gukesh. Rook to c2 was followed in the game, but the rooks have no future for the knight. The knight is just locked down. The queen cannot do anything, and the rook cannot go back. Even if you dare to capture the pawn on the b2 square, there is rook to e8, attacking the rook on the f8 square. the position will be just over for you. Here, we have f6 by Gukesh, and Liren sacrificed his rook on the g7 square. This forces Gukesh to resign the game because, after you capture the rook, bishop takes f8 check. And Ding will make his queen, the position just becomes over, but don't be upset, Gukesh, as always I am with you, your Indian friend and mentor. Practice with Stockfish, and become stronger for the next day. You have to win the World Chess Championship, because the seat is waiting for you. I hope you enjoyed the game very much. If so, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Wishing you all the best. Bye bye, take care and see you soon.